Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah al-Kareem. Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to thank Brother Munib for this invitation. We were speaking just during dessert, and I was saying that this cause and what we're celebrating tonight is actually very dear to my heart. When I was entering my own post-secondary education, I had a very, very difficult time, and I relied on whatever scholarships or bursaries I could cobble together. And as evidence of how unsuccessful that bid was, I should let you all know that I'm still paying for my education 8 years after I've graduated. Now, that of course is because I should have managed my money a little bit better than I have. But the point is that it is a great benefit to our community to have an organization like this that can stand up behind some of our most accomplished youth and say, we are behind you, and we will support you, and we will find innovative ways to make your dreams come true. So thank you. Thank you for the wonderful work that you do. In the 1950s, Albert Einstein was working the lecture circuit in America. And at one point, he was giving the same lecture on special relativity over and over again, once every week, twice every week, at a different college or university campus in the country. To the point where after, in one particular occasion, he had just finished his speech and he went back into his car, the chauffeur opened up the door, Mr. Einstein sat in the back, and as they were driving back to the hotel, the chauffeur said, "You know, Mr. Einstein, I've heard you give that speech so many times, I bet you I could give the same speech." Now, for those of you that have read about him, Einstein had a wicked sense of humor, and he said, "You're on." So the next time Einstein had to make a speech, they chose a small college that hadn't really read too much or hadn't seen any photographs of Mr. Einstein. So what he did was he dressed his chauffeur in Einstein's best suit. He scruffled up his hair, gave him some hair dye to make him look like he was Albert Einstein. And Einstein, on the other hand, put on the chauffeur's cap and drove the car. And the chauffeur was in the back pretending he was Albert Einstein. When they got to the campus, they were welcomed into the auditorium. The dean of the school opened up the door at the back and stuck out his hand and said, "Mr. Einstein, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for coming to our school." The chauffeur said, "Well, it's a pleasure to be here." And they went into the auditorium, and for the next hour, the chauffeur gave that same speech that he had heard Albert Einstein deliver so many times before. At the end of the speech, he got a rousing round of applause and a standing ovation. But there was someone in the crowd who raised his hand, and it happened to be a professor of physics. And the professor put up his hand and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Einstein, I have a question." Now, the chauffeur wasn't ready for this. What could he do? He said, "Okay, what's your question?" And the professor proceeded to ask a very complicated question about a specific clause in the theory of special relativity, something that the chauffeur on stage had never heard of. And it was obvious the person who was asking the question was asking because he was a professor of physics, and he wanted to show that he was smarter than Mr. Einstein. After listening to the question, the chauffeur, who was at the podium just like this, stopped and said, "That's a very good question, sir. But that's also a very easy question. It's so easy that I'm going to let my chauffeur answer it in the back." The point is this. In our world today, it's not what you know, it's what people think you know that will get you very far. It's a sad reality, but it's true. I'm going to talk about a topic today that is going to have some of you wishing you didn't come tonight, and for that I apologize. I'm going to talk about why school sucks. It sounds very provocative. I'm going to talk about why good students fail. I'm going to talk about what the students who are scholarship winners tonight here have to do to make sure that they control their own education and they not let their education be dictated to or by anyone else. We live in a world where the value of knowledge is diminishing. We live in a world where the traditional modes of transmission of education from teacher to student or master to disciple are no longer valued. There used to be a time where people would spend years studying a single text, learning as much about the text from the actions of their teacher as they did from the text itself. In today's world, those ideas and that way of understanding education is no longer even possible. It's not even spoken of. And here's why. I'm going to talk, we have some professors in the audience. I'm going to talk about the bane of every professor's existence. The one thing that I bet you professors around this country simply cannot stand. And that thing is called Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, for those of you that don't know, is, in a way, it's like the descendant of the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia revolutionized the way we understand knowledge. It was something that took place arguably in about the 18th century in France. There was a philosopher by the name of Denis Diderot who was commissioned to write an encyclopedia. Sorry, he was commissioned to translate an encyclopedia that existed in Germany. He got his hands on that encyclopedia, and he said, you know, there's a lot of knowledge in here. Why are we stopping at just translating this? Why don't we set out to compile all of the knowledge in the world in writing? For the next 25 years, that's what Diderot did. He suffered harassment. He was beaten up. The clergy threatened to name him a blasphemer, all because he thought he could compile all of the world's existing knowledge into a book. 25 years later, he had compiled 32 volumes, 72,000 articles, and 4,000 illustrations. Now, it was problematic on a number of fronts. First and foremost is that not all men and not all women should have all knowledge. Knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And you could argue that some people shouldn't have all knowledge until they're ready for it. Of course, the encyclopedia had its own political spin as well, and he was against all things traditional and against things that were sacred, and he wanted to usher in the era of enlightenment by throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So there were some problems there as well. Most importantly is this. He thought he could contain the knowledge of the Western world in a series of books, and he wound up with 35 volumes. Can you imagine someone saying, you know, let's gather all of the knowledge in the world and put it into 35 volumes? It's simply not possible. At 35 volumes, most other societies would just be getting started. But that's what he tried to do. It was important in a number of respects. Most importantly, it was the first time in the modern Western world that we start to see the commodification of knowledge, that we start to see that knowledge can be bought, it can be traded, it can be sold. And the moment you start doing those things, you devalue the idea of knowledge in the first place. Socrates, 2,000-3,000 years ago, he was offended when people would come and ask him, how much do you charge for your lessons? He was offended. Why would a teacher take money to impart knowledge to their students? In fact, he railed against the sophists. You know this word sophisticated? And I don't know if there's an American sign translation for sophisticated, but there should be. I'm hoping. Yeah. It comes from the word sophistry, and sophists were a group of people who went around from city to city delivering infomercials that taught people the art of rhetoric, taught people the art of how to sound like they were smart, how to convince people in a debate without really knowing anything. Socrates hated these people. He ridiculed them, and he told his students, be careful what enters your mind, because it's not a vessel like a container of food that can be emptied. And if there was one thing I learned from my own university education, it was that one sentence. Unfortunately, I learned it on the day I was graduating and not beforehand. Otherwise, it would have changed my experience completely. Going back to Wikipedia, proponents of Wikipedia say that it's great. They call it the democratization of knowledge. They say we're taking knowledge and we're making it accessible to anybody. What it means in reality is that anyone, anywhere in the world, can say they're an expert on anything as long as they have an internet connection. That's not the democratization of knowledge. That's the monetization of knowledge. If you can afford an internet connection, $15 a month, that means you can be an expert on something. Poor guy living in the slums of New Delhi can't afford an internet connection, therefore he can't be an expert on anything. Although, if it came down to life experiences, I'm sure the person in the slums in Delhi has all of us beat because they know how to survive with very little, something that some of us here don't know how to do. When we talk about the monetization of knowledge and the commodification of knowledge, these things aren't part of education. They were never meant to be. That is simply dumb, to think you can go on Wikipedia and become an expert, or to go on Wikipedia and write an article and claim to be an expert. And it's not just dumb, it's what John Taylor Gatto, famous educator, called dumbing us down. What passes as knowledge these days and what passes as education these days is actually not education. It's a way to make us docile. Take a simple example like a campus map. Most of us have been to a campus, whether it's here or in another country. You walk on a campus and there's usually a big map somewhere that tells you where to go. You can study that map and you can learn that map and memorize that map, and you will know every single building on that campus. What that map will never tell you is which building is the nicest in the summer because it has the nicest air conditioning unit. It will never tell you which building is the nicest place to read Shakespeare because it has a view of something beautiful outside. In my case, the map will never tell you where that cute girl that you've had your eye on for the last 2 semesters studies math in which library. It'll never tell you that. That's not something that comes from a map. That's something that comes from here, and in some cases, that's something that comes from here. Those of you who are about to enter post-secondary education are about to enter one of the most bizarre and strangest experiences of your life. That experience is known as a campus. You're about to enter a world where colleges and universities and technical institutes will give you a one-size-fits-all model for becoming smart. In many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, they will tell you what to study, they will tell you when to study it, and they'll tell you how to study. And if you don't study well, they will tell you to go to another course where they will teach you how to study well so that you can eventually graduate with a piece of paper that says, "I studied well." And that piece of paper is not valued very much. As it happens, I happen to be moving very soon, and I was looking at one room in my home, and we call it our wall of money. And the reason we call it the wall of money is because my wife and I have our degrees on the wall, and it's 4 frames, 4 pieces of paper in each frame. That wall cost us probably a total of $200,000 in 8 years of our lives. And sometimes I wonder what would happen if I took that $200,000 and I invested it in a harebrained scheme that I had when I was 20 or 21 years old. Would I have made it? Would I be a millionaire right now? Would I be a billionaire right now? Would my life be any better had I taken that money and not done what people told me to do, which was go to school and get an education? No, beta, you have to go to school, then you get married. I could have, and I did. I did all of that, but would my life have changed? The world that you're about to live in for the next 3 years or 4 years of your life, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is a world where the pursuit of knowledge sometimes will take a back seat. You're about to enter a world where some of the professors you'll have, present company excluded, some of the professors that you will have may in fact be world-renowned experts in their fields. But by design, they are limited to teaching you for 45 minutes a week, or an hour a week, or twice a week. Can you imagine being on a campus with someone like Stephen Hawking and the university saying you can only learn from him for 45 minutes a week? These are people whose ideas can change the world. They can make this world a better place, and the universities say you can only access them for 45 minutes a week. You will have professors and TAs who do not even know your names. And not speaking about the professors, but some of the TAs, they probably don't even want to know your names. And forget about your names. If you're taking psychology or engineering or some first-year courses, you are going to be one student sitting in an auditorium with 2,000 other students seated next to you. Forget about your names. Your professors will never even see your faces unless you take the time to pursue an education.